Time to get that gas water heater disconnected and hauled out of your house. It's not working. You've got problems with this. You've got problems with that. You've made some repairs. Now it's developed a leak along a seam. That's not something you can fix. So it's time for a new one. Trust me, in the long run, you'll be happy. Greater efficiency, probably quicker turnaround, so it's got a tank full of hot water ready for you faster. And there might be some sort of energy credit. Sometimes there's energy credits, so talk to your accountant about that. In the meantime, it only takes a few tools to get this guy out of the way, and let's dive into it. Now up on top, the first thing we need to remember is I've got to get this tank started draining, because if I'm just going to hook a hose up and let it drain that way, it's going to take 45 minutes to an hour. Also, I'm going to leave the water on when I initially begin draining it, because I want that pressure of that incoming water to help blow out any sediment that might have settled in front of the drain. And if I leave that water on for just a minute or two, it'll clear out that sediment, and then the rest of the flow will be much smoother. Now, at that point, I've turned the water off, and we would continue the removal from that point. But if you've decided to try a cool trick, you want to learn something special, I have fashioned this little guy together, and all this is a stainless braided flexible water supply line fittings to adapt it to this on-off valve, with another fitting that will clip onto an air hose for an air compressor. If screwed on the inlet and you leave the outlet still hooked up, it will allow me to pressurize this tank and blow the water out of that garden hose at a much more impressive rate. This will empty a water heater in 5 minutes flat, okay, maybe 10. Dramatically quicker than just letting it go by gravity. Yeah, your compressor is going to be running during that time, but it's definitely worth the time it'll save. So you might consider putting one of these little jewels together. But you can't have this one. This one's mine. I'm going to go down and get the drain hooked up, get the garden hose hooked up on it, and get the drain opened. Okay? I'm going to gently screw this garden hose onto the drain outlet. It's got plastic threads. I don't want to cross thread it. At that point, once I've got it fairly tight on there, not crazy tight, but fairly tight, I'm going to begin loosening the valve to let it drain. Once that's draining good, I'll get this gas line turned off, turn off the gas valve, disconnect this gas line real quick. I'll probably turn the gas valve to the off position here. Disconnect it here. Now, even though the main gas valve is shut off, I'm going to smell some gas when I release this, and that's okay. It's just a little bit. Once that's off, I'm going to remove this fitting from the gas valve, because the next water heater might need it. Oftentimes, the fittings you'll require will be slightly different, and it might take a little playing with it to get the right setup going. So we've got that good. We've got it draining. We're going to move back to the top. Now, once we're on top, we've got the draining process started. We're going to turn off the water at this point, because we should have cleared any sediment out. We're going to disconnect the down tube coming off the TPR, which should be here. It needs to run within 6 inches of the floor. We'll disconnect that as well. We'll get these main lines going, and we should be set. Actually, we can disconnect them right up here. Would make more sense. So we'll need 2 wrenches for that. Now yours might be soldered with hard line, with just solid copper all the way to the inlet and all the way from the outlet back into the house, in which case you'll need a tubing cutter to cut it free. Don't cut it too short though, give yourself plenty of room so that you can adapt it to whatever circumstance you find yourself in with the new one. I wouldn't necessarily recommend resoldering the new one back in though. That's a lot of work when compression hoses and shark bites will do the same high quality job in a lot less time. And really not all that much more money either. So these are off and ready to go. Your vent pipe would sit down on this cap right in here, and it might be held in with a couple of screws, or it might just be sitting on there. Either way, you're going to want to loosen those screws if you need to, get it set up off of there and out of the way, and you're ready to get this beast moved as soon as it's done draining. That really covers all the procedures of the things you might need to do to get your old water heater removed. And as soon as you get this guy lugged out of the way, you'll be ready to put in the new one. Okay, so you've got the old one muscled out, you've got the new one muscled into place, and let's talk about the basics of installation for a gas one for just a second. For starters, if you are installing this in a garage or an outdoor environment of any kind, or where there's concerns like this, codes are going to require that you put it up on an 18-inch tall stand at the very least. And they don't want you building a stand out of 2x4 lumber that's subject to moisture damage, obviously. The codes call for a metal type stand or an actual platform being built that can resist moisture. The metal type stands are about $40 and they pretty much last indefinitely, so they're a good purchase if you're going to keep using gas over the years. This would normally be on that sort of a stand in a garage environment. That's to make sure that any fumes from gas that you might use in the lawnmower or in the car or the cans that are around the garage, those sort of things, those fumes are heavy, they stay down low. And that's to make sure those fumes don't end up in the path of the burner assembly for this gas water heater and cause a potential explosion. That would be bad. So make sure you put it on a stand. The other thing you may need, depending on your locale, you have to check with your local codes, but you may need to install some sort of steel or concrete filled post to protect the water heater from damage from cars coming into the garage as well. Some municipalities require those and some don't. They're a great idea and they can be installed. They're not easy or fun to install, but they can be installed fairly simply and they're really not that expensive. And once you've got those basics of code compliance covered and taken care of, we're going to start the installation by getting the main supply lines hooked up, get the water turned back on, and get this guy filled. And then we'll go through the rest of the installation procedure. By the time you're done, it'll be full and ready to double check and make sure it's good, get lit, and get some hot water going in the house. This particular hot water heater has a TPR valve. I almost said TPS. It's not a TPS, it's a TPR. Temperature pressure relief valve. Gas water heaters are traditionally, you'll find them on the side. They are something that needs to be serviced and maintained and checked, and as often gets replaced once in a while. And that's okay. Its job is to release any pressure, excess pressure or temperature that it senses within the tank so that you don't have an issue with the tank splitting or exploding, something crazy like that. So that's what this is for. It'll get a drain plugged into it, screwed into it. That drain needs to end within 6 inches of the floor just to make sure if it does blow open, it doesn't soak everyone around in super hot water. So make sure you get that drain installed as well. Now up here on top, we've got copper coming out of the walls. What we're going to install in this installation is essentially a stainless steel flex line like this. It has male fittings. It has a male fitting on one side with a rubber O-ring in it for the sealing factor. That means we really don't even have to install any sort of thread sealant separately. You can if you'd like. It's completely up to you, but you'll find that if these are properly installed, they're leak-free. Also, the stainless steel gives the rubber hose on the inside the strength it needs to resist the pressure and temperature, and it gives it the flexibility. Now, if you move it too far, you certainly can crimp it, so pay attention to the angle by which you have to install it. The ones we're going to use, just to show you a different look, are a compression type, but I wanted, if I could for just a moment, to show you another type. This is a shark bite fitting. It's a press fitting designed to slide right onto the existing copper, or if it's PEX coming out of your wall, it'd be the same circumstance. You just make sure it slides in far enough to meet its requirements from the manufacturer. And these are fantastic and really time-saving. Sometimes they can be tricky to find, and actually they can be especially hard to find in shorter lengths. So if you have a hard time finding them, the compression type fittings are great as well. Either way, if I walk in on a water heater that I'm going to be replacing and it's already got copper and it's already soldered in place, you can cut those components out of the way and you could certainly use fittings such as these to screw on with some thread sealant, of course, to screw on and build your copper assembly and get them soldered back into place. Now you want to do all your soldering off of here, so you would solder your piece into this fitting, then screw it on with thread sealant after it was cool, and then where this pipe stopped, maybe where the elbow is, that would be where you do the rest of your soldering to tie it in. You don't want to expose this to any heat at all. You want to stay a good 6, 8, 10, 12 inches away from it and get your soldering done and out of the way so that you don't have any problems with these components. I don't do that whenever possible for a couple of reasons. The main reason really is convenience as well as reliability. So the last aspect of installation is some localities also require straps for water heaters to secure them to the wall, to the studs in the wall, to make sure if there's any sort of earthquake or something like that, that the water heater won't fall over. Especially a gas water heater, that's obviously a danger, a hazard risk that you want to avoid, and the straps will help you do that. So make sure that you're meeting your codes for this swap as well. Now, this compression fitting doesn't have a separate ferrule. It is built into the nut on this particular model, and all we're going to do is slide that into place. Once it's on, you're ready for the rest of the hose to go on and get tightened up. We're going to use 2 wrenches, one to hold the primary fitting still and one to turn the nut. Once it's finger tight, we'll get the wrenches in there, let them do their job. Dun, 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 dun. Well, that one doesn't fit, does it? Righty tighty, lefty loosey, right? Once that's on good and tight, then you can secure it where it goes into the water heater. Like I said, it can be on there fairly tight, but it does have a rubber seal in there, so there's no reason to over compress that. You really just need it tight enough to not leak. Oops, sorry about that. Tight enough to not leak. So once you've got that good and tight, the other hose installs the same way. I usually put this side on first, just so I don't have to fight the pipes with the angle after bending it if it's already attached to the water heater. Once again, one pipe on the nut, one pipe on the fitting. Cameramen are whispering. I wonder if that's good or bad. Okay, good. Once that's on there good and tight, you're ready to get it screwed onto the water heater. Come on now. Once that's good and tight, now's the time to go turn on your water main. If you have a valve right there by the water heater, great. Turn it on, get it starting to fill up. If you open the faucet in the house just to let some air in or to let it drain, make sure you turn that off. If you have to go out to your water meter box and turn it on, that's fine as well. And then you come back, double check for leaks at all the hose connections. Make sure everything's good and tight. If it is, you can move down to, well, no, before you move to the bottom, you might as well get the adapter in place. This goes on top of the gas water heater. It allows it to mate to your vent that should already be in place. We are replacing a gas water heater after all. And it just sits in these holes right on the top of the water heater. And then it'd have some self-tapping screws that would lock it in place. Your vent would go right back over here just like it was on the old one. And sometimes they secure with a screw, but there's no need for any sort of duct tape or anything crazy like that. It can just sit right up on top of there. If it's vented properly, it'll suck the fumes up as part of an updraft. Matter of fact, you can even test your draft effectively by holding a match over near this area and seeing if the flame is pulled underneath that hood. That'll tell you if it's drawing the air up like it should. So once this is taken care of, you're ready to move down to the bottom of the water heater to get the gas hooked up and to get the system up and operational as soon as it's full. Now once you get down here, the first thing I have a tendency to check is to make sure that the drain is closed. I'm just going to make sure it's tight. You should be able to hear the water filling up the tank in preparation for the gas to get lit and for it to get operational. Now, obviously I'm down even further normally than I would have to be with a gas one, especially in a garage location, because it would be on an 18-inch metal stand and you're working more in this area, which is more comfortable. For the sake of the display, for the height, we needed it down pretty much flat on the floor. This is your gas control valve, and we are going to hook up the gas to it. We've got the gas turned off, but we need to install this fitting, and it goes right in the side of the gas valve here. We're going to use a Teflon tape designed for gas fittings. You cannot use a standard Teflon tape on this. It will break down and it will develop a leak quickly. 2 or 3 wraps with this special gas thread sealant, and it's ready to screw on. Your adapter situation might be dramatically different. You might not have a hose, you might have a solid line. The basic principles are the same. You may need to find the correct adapters to go from the end you currently have into the gas valve. I'm going to get it in there pretty snug, about like that. Now this end is a flared fitting end, so you don't want any thread sealant on there at all. You don't want a chance that it'll interfere with this flared fitting. Just going to align the hose properly, get it screwed on. Get that snug. Now, I'm going to remove this cover. You can see that small window there where you can get a good look at what's going on inside and make sure your pilot light is lit. At this point, the water heater is off, but we're going to turn it to the pilot section. Now keep in mind, I've reviewed the instructions. I'm familiar with how to light and start this particular water heater. Different ones they have different startup procedures, so double check your water heater's instructions. They're almost always printed on a label right on the front there by the gas valve. If not, they might be in the manual. So find them and review them before you attempt this procedure. Doing it exactly like I'm about to do it might not be right for your water heater. I'm going to turn the gas on. We're going to use some of this leak detector, which is, you can use soapy water as well, and I did that for years, but this stuff works good and reliably, and it's inexpensive. And I'm just going to coat each fitting and make sure that there's no big bubbles. With the soapy water mixture, it'll do the same thing. It'll blow big bubbles, and then you can tell you've got gas leaking out of a fitting and you need to do something differently there. Now, with the knob turned in the pilot position, I'm going to bend over so I can see through that glass, and while holding this pilot button down with one hand or one finger, I'm going to push this igniter like this. You'll hear it click. Whenever it clicks, it is sending a spark out to the end near the pilot so that it can get that lit. Now once it sparks and it's lit, you need to continue to hold the knob down for about 60 seconds. Once it's lit and you've held it for 60 seconds approximately, sometimes less, sometimes more, you can let up on the knob. If it stays lit, you're golden. If it goes out, you'll need to go through the procedure again by holding the button down while clicking the igniter and then continuing to hold it down for 30, 60 seconds again just to make sure it stays lit that time. Now once it's lit and it stays lit, we can turn it on and set the temperature, make sure that the gas burner flares up properly and that the flame looks right. So it's on, it's staying on. Now it's time to turn it on and get the temperature set. So now it's as simple as turning the knob to the on position, right there, rotating the dial to the desired temperature, There it is. You heard that click. That's it telling the gas burner to come on. If your gas burner came on, great. If it didn't, there's some sort of secondary problem, but that's extremely rare. Brand new water heaters are really reliable right off the line. You see I've put it at the triangle. That's their recommended starter setting. Once this whole tank is hot and at temperature, you want to test the water and see if it's going to meet your needs, or turn it up or down accordingly. And when you find that final setting, you can just leave it like it is and be ready to go. Now, one thing we're looking for, and we'll check the flame for, is a nice, good blue flame without a lot of crazy orange sparkles and some of those sort of things. If you're getting more of an orange or a yellow flame with less blue, that could signify a problem, and you might want to call the manufacturer and discuss it with them. Otherwise, replace the cover, wait patiently for your tank of water to heat up, and begin using it.